It can be a little bit tricky to use, but if you get it right, the rewards can be great. That's right, today we are talking about the Transcendent C'tan. The Transcendent C'tan datasheet has only slightly changed, but the nuances and how you use it have also changed. It is now slightly different. So we're going to run through that today, starting with the stat block. Looking at that stat block, it's got a movement of 8 inches now, up from 6, toughness 11. It's got a 3 up save and a 4 up invuln. It's also got 16 wounds now, a leadership of 6 and an OC of 4. Unit composition wise, you can only take it as one model, obviously. Its points cost is 305 or 330 if you take it in the Pantheon of Woe detachment. We'll come on to that later. And the base size, it's on a 60mm flight base. Moving to keywords, it's got monster, character, fly, and Transcendent C'tan. All pretty straightforward stuff. In terms of war gear, it's got probably what I would call the flattest profile out of all the C'tan, but it's still pretty interesting, so we'll take a look. So first up is its ranged attack, Seismic Assault. This only has a 12-inch range. It's got 6 attacks, you're hitting on 2s, it's strength 8, AP 2, damage 2. And it also has 2 important keywords, Assault and Sustained Hits 1. Assault is particularly important because that synergizes with its ability. We'll talk about that in a little bit. In melee, it uses its Crackling Tendrils. You get 8 attacks again, you're hitting on 2s again, but this is strength 10, AP 3, and some super swingy damage. It's D6, baby, can go either way. But you also get the keyword Sustained Hits 1. So on paper, its melee and range attacks are quite good, but where it pays for its points really is in its abilities, so let's look at those. Core ability-wise, it's got Reanimation Protocols, which all Necron units get, and it's got a Feel No Pain of 5+, makes it even more tanky. Like other C'tan, it's got Deadly Demise D6, and it's now gained Deep Strike. And also like other C'tan, it has Necrodermis, so all enemy attacks are -1 damage. If it's a damage 2 attack, it becomes damage 1. If it's an odd number, you round up, so a damage 3 attack becomes damage 2. And of course, it's an enslaved Star God, so this unit cannot be your warlord. It's also got another ability called C'tan Shard. Actually, this is a detriment. What it is that this unit cannot take enhancements. The reason this exists is because you can take more than one of this C'tan. You can take up to 3 in a list. Normally, any unit, apart from an epic hero, can take an enhancement. So they've just put that in there just to tone the Transcendent C'tan down, stop it being too OP. Its main ability, and the real reason why many of us take it, is Transdimensional Displacement. When you declare an advance move, instead of advancing, you can redeploy in the same way as you would via Deep Strike. So you can take him off the board and put him back on the board anywhere outside of 9 inches from enemy units. There is a way to get outside of 6 inches from enemy units, but we'll come on to that shortly. That's the stat line, war gear, and abilities all covered, but what about how to play this unit? Well, I've come up with a couple of ideas. Let's dive in. The first one was often how he was played in the past, which was as a distraction carnifex. What I mean by this is you can yeet him up the board using that ability, particularly if your opponent has left a hole in their back lines. Drop him in there early game and just disrupt your opponent's lines, force them to deal with that threat rather than coming to you, and that gives you time to establish board control. However, because his profile has changed, you need to watch out for big threats now. In the past, his Necrodermis ability enabled him to halve all incoming damage, and this meant he was pretty tanky even against big guns or big melee damage, but now it's only -1 damage. So if you yeet him up the board and place him in the line of fire of some of those really big damage dealing weapons, he is not going to last very long. So if you do use him as this distraction carnifex, be careful where you place him. The second way, and how I like to play him, is as a mid-table bully. He can protect your skirmishers, so place him behind some cover, and then when your opponent comes out to deal with those cheaper units, the scouts or the infiltrators that you've put on the mid-board objectives, he can then jump out and deal very comfortably with them. Alternatively, you can threaten your opponent's natural expansion. In competitive play, usually in the mid-board, on one of the flanks, one of the objectives is closer to your deployment zone. That's your natural expansion, and vice versa for your opponent. So send him out there, go and threaten that, because he can usually kill what's on there and then hold it for you. I mentioned this other one a lot, but he's a good marine killer. AP2, damage 2, it kills a lot of marines. It's really, really good. He's also great into other 2 wound units. The third way to play him is also kind of ties in with the second one. So instead of yeeting him as at the earliest opportunity, save that ability for later on. Use him as a later game scorer. Use his ability to score or deny primary points by putting him on objectives when there are fewer units left towards the end of the game. And he can also grab valuable last secondaries doing this as well. Some secondaries are actually sitting on the primary, so that you can get double bubble. What about best detachments? Well, because he's quite versatile, you can use him in almost all detachments, but there's a couple for me where he stands out particularly. And the 2 I've picked, it'll be no surprises here, are Pantheon of Woe and Hypercrypt Legion. Now, Pantheon of Woe, he is good, but I would argue he's not great. There is, in my opinion, a little bit of a lack of synergy there. And I'll talk about this because, as we mentioned before, in Pantheon of Woe, his points go up because he has to take an enhancement. It's mandatory. And that enhancement here is relativistic tether. What that enables him to do is, instead of deep striking or instead of teleporting outside of 9 inches, you can teleport outside of 6 inches. So it's much harder for your opponent to screen him out. However, you can't charge after this. Even if you've deep struck, you still cannot charge after this. And also, it does not synergize with the detachment rule for Pantheon of Woe, which is distortion fields. And in order to make a unit unravel, you have to be within 6 inches of a unit, whereas his deep strike ability with relativistic tether is just outside 6 inches. So no cheating. Don't use this relativistic tether ability to put him just outside of 6 inches and then tell your opponent that his units next to it are now unraveling, because they are not. Play it fair. It is still strong in Pantheon of Woe because almost all the strats do synergize. It's just not quite as strong as it is for all of the other C'tan. I think there's still a role for the Transcendent within Pantheon of Woe, but it's not an auto-include for me like, say, the Nightbringer or the Deceiver, for example. In Hypercrypt Legion, only one stratagem applies. We'll come on to that shortly. But the Deep Strike keyword does synergize well with Hypercrypt Legion's Detachment rule, which allows you to take your units off the table at the end of your opponent's turn if it's not in engagement range. So it gives you that uppy-downy ability. Movement wins your games. This is very strong. It also enables you to bait and switch, so you can go, I'm over here, oops, now I'm over there, oops, now I'm over here, against a slow-moving opponent in particular, and thinking about the density of terrain on tournament tables, this can be very strong. In addition, it can also give your opponent more questions to answer, which in my opinion can only be a good thing. For example, if you can see that your opponent is preparing to try and capture objective A from you, you can teleport in the Transcendent C'tan and go and threaten objective B, which they hold, and then they have to think about where they're going to focus their fire, etc. Stratagem-wise, I will keep beating the drum for this. It's the best stratagem in the game. Rapid Ingress, it's 1 CP, and this enables you to deep strike at the end of your opponent's movement phase. So after your opponent's moved everything on the board, you can bring in the Transcendent C'tan from deep strike. Position it somewhere where it's not going to take too much damage, but is going to be a threat in your turn. In addition, Rapid Ingress is really good if you need the C'tan in melee, because, as we've mentioned before, the ability of the Transcendent C'tan to teleport means that you can't charge afterwards because it's done in advance. So if you need it in melee, use Rapid Ingress, and then in your turn you can move and then charge. Another one that I do quite like to use, particularly in that mid-table bully role, is Heroic Intervention for 1 CP. So the C'tan can be lurking near a unit that's holding a mid-board objective for you. When your opponent charges that unit, if it ends its charge within 6 inches of the Transcendent can then charge it. And to be honest, all the stratagems pretty much work in Pantheon of Woe, but one of the ones I really do like is Disharmonization Cascade. It's 1 CP, you get to Deadly Demise on a 3+. I know it's slightly swingy, but I think it's very often worth it, particularly in the case of the Transcendent, because if you have done that Distraction Carnifex thing where you've yeeted him up the board into the thick of the enemy, then he's probably been surrounded, so a Deadly Demise will actually chuck out a lot of mortal wounds. It's worth the gamble. Another one I do really like in Pantheon of Woe is Molecular Erosion, and again this is only 1 CP. It forces an enemy unit to take a battle shock test at -1 to their leadership, and if they fail, it is D3 plus 1 mortal wounds, so it's another way to do some damage, particularly to elite units. As I mentioned, there's only one that really synergizes in Hypercrypt Legion. It's 1 CP, it's Reanimation Crypts. We all know this one. This is the one that triggers your reanimation protocols while the unit is in reserves. So if he's injured, needs some wounds put him back on while he's off the battlefield, then you can do that. I hope that has given you some ideas about how to play this unit. I think it's got a couple of strings to its bow. It's a little harder to master than some of the other C'tan, but it's worth the effort. However, how do you defeat this unit? If it's on the other side of the table, what do we do? Well, here's some ideas. Usually with a big threat, you can kind of ignore it, you play around it, but because this is so mobile, you absolutely cannot do that. But because it has that flat war gear profile we mentioned earlier, you can feed it chaff. What I mean by this in particular is battle line units. You can play the OC game here. So 40k is a point scoring game. It's not just about killing things. So if you imagine a mid-board objective, if you put 20 warriors on there, that's 40 OC. This has 4 OC. So you only need 3 warriors to out OC the Transcendent C'tan. And because it's got that flat war gear profile we talked about, it doesn't have loads of sweep attacks like a Nightbringer or a Void Dragon. Transcendent C'tan is not going to easily chew through a 20-man blob of warriors, particularly when you can bring those warriors back. So anything like that that's got that regenerative ability where you can replenish the ranks is going to cause problems. But also, just simply any battle line, you can out-OC and score those points or deny your opponent scoring those points. The best way, of course, is with big damage. As we talked about before, it is susceptible to big damage weapons. So you want things with big guns and ideally things with melter damage for that extra damage as well. And if you really need it, stuff with lethal hits that can bypass the Transcendent's high toughness. Put enough shots through from small arms fire with lethal hits and it will fail some saves and you will do some chip damage. So the Transcendent C'tan has the fly keyword, character keyword and monster keyword. Some war gear have the anti-fly, anti-character or anti-monster keywords and you can use those to bypass again that high toughness. Some of those also combine with devastating wounds, so again you're getting past the save as well. For those of you new to Necrons, you might also be wondering where to buy this unit because it's not immediately obvious, so let's take a look. I mean, the first thing to say is it's a very expensive set. It comes with the Tesseract Vault. It is basically the battery that powers the Tesseract Vault. Now, it's a beautiful model, the Tesseract Vault, but it's impractical. It's very hard to play it in competitive 40k because it's so big. It takes up so much room. It's a real shame, in my opinion, because it's a gorgeous model. I think it's one of the most beautiful set pieces we've got, but it's very difficult to get it on the table. And the other thing is if you build it as the Tesseract Vault, the Transcendent C'tan is integrated into that model. So you can't actually run the Transcendent C'tan as a separate unit. If you want to build them separately, you can build that vehicle as the Obelisk, and then you get to play with the C'tan. I'm not sure why in that image the C'tan is so blurry. Perhaps he's just phasing in. Now, the Obelisk is never seen competitively. It's just basically an expensive shelf ornament at the moment. It might improve in 11th edition. Let's keep our fingers crossed. But basically, you would be spending an awful lot of money to buy the Obelisk to put it on the shelf just to get the Transcendent C'tan. However, if you do really want to buy the official model, here's where you can get all your Necrons and more. If you're based in the UK, please shop at Loaded Dice. It's an award-winning local gaming store. They offer some really good discounts. They've got significant amount of Necron stock, and the service is really, really good. There's an affiliate link in the comments. Also, a quick shout out to their starter bundles. So if you are new to Necrons, you can get starter bundles like this Combat Patrol and the Necron Codex at a nice discount. Beyond that, I'd just like to do a big shout out to my Patreon and channel members. At elite level, we've got Adam Fortier 1247, Castor, Chris Raven 932, David Lloyd, Living Dead Girl 40k. A big welcome to Northern Realms, thank you my friend. Robbie Ricks, Slayer Miniatures, Varity 6253, Varity, and a new member, Whistle Piglets 125. At leader level, we have Colin Nichol, Stainsby Kingsby, David Pooley, and Stephen Ramsey. Thank you so much, guys. If you like looking at painted Necrons, go and check out my Instagram, because Stephen Ramsey has painted an enormous amount of my Necrons for me, and I'm deeply grateful to him. Thank you, Stephen. And finally, at Epic Heroes level, we've got Rally Point Games and Mines, Morton Monks of Roller, and Sovolf. That's it for this unit review. Let me know in the comments if I've missed anything, or if you have any other ways to use a Transcendent C'tan. And look out for the next unit review. Thank you.